Hello, so what we're going to do today, we're going to make a menu scene for our game. Very, very simple in concept, very, very simple in execution, in fact. And actually, what I'm doing is I'm using the platformer game that hopefully, if you've been following a couple of other tutorials, you've seen me make. Um, but actually, it doesn't really matter what game you make. This method works for pretty much any kind of game and any style. Okay. You'll see on the screen that I have two scenes. So I have scene one, okay, and I have scene two, um, and I've helpfully added a little, just subtle marker of some big text that tells me which scene's which, just so we can't get confused, as well as some subtle changes. Okay. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new scene, and this scene is going to be our menu scene. So I'm going to save it in the scene folder as menu. Okay. And this menu scene will be the first thing that happens, and the first thing that we see when we load. Okay. So then I'm going to go to File, Build Settings. So build settings are the settings for when you actually want to turn your game into something, when you want to actually build and create a version of your game that other people can run without Unity. Okay. So then what I'm going to do, I'm going to drag into this box here as scenes. Okay. So you can see the scenes in build here. So these are all the scenes that are going to be included when you actually build the game. We have scene 0, scene 1 and scene 2. And scene 0, the top scene, which for us is menu, is always the one that's going to be loaded first when you actually build the game. Obviously in the editor, your scene that you have open is loaded when you press play, but when it comes to building it, it's whatever scene is first in the list. Okay. So now we have a menu scene that's going to be the first thing that we load when we come to any game. Okay. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to add a few things to make sure that our game kind of has a bit of a sort of identity and a look and feel to it. Okay. So you can see I've added the text. Okay. I have a canvas here, and for those who remember, the canvas is where all the UI elements are stored. Okay. I've got it set to overlay mode, okay, and I'm going to have it scale with screen size. So when we adjust the screen size, okay, when we change how our game looks, when we adjust the resolution, it adjusts based on these settings. Okay. So I'm going to make my text really big. Okay. Change a few of the style for it. So I'm going to make it a nice blue colour. Okay. I've just adjusted some of the font settings, made it bigger. I'm going to give my game a name. Okay, so we now have a title. Okay. What I'm also going to do is I'm going to add a couple of buttons. Okay. And these buttons are the ones we're going to press to actually launch the game. Okay. And we'll leave it at that for now, and we can come back and make it look a bit prettier when the time comes. Okay. So we have two buttons. Okay. I'm going to call them 1 and 2. Okay. And we could add some text if we want to, but I happily have somewhere some numbers added in quite nicely here. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to add some pictures into them, okay, and change the kind of how they look and feel. So we're going to make each one about 80 by 80. We're going to change the positioning. And you guys can, you can add some images to yours if you've got some, or you can also quite easily decide that just some text is enough, and you can update the text. That's fairly straightforward. Right. So I have button 1 and button 2. Okay. Button 1 is going to take me to level 1. Button 2 is going to take me to level 2. Okay. So on the button here, okay, when I scroll down, you'll see you have this button component, and the button component has a whole bunch of different things, but one of the things it has is this on click. So this on click allows you to run an event, and the event is reasonably straightforward. The event just corresponds to a piece of code that we add in. Okay. So we just need to write some code to load some games. So we're going to call it menu script, imaginatively. And I'll wait for menu script to load, wait for Visual Studio to load. Okay, so we're going to use a part of Unity called scene management. Okay, so scene management, as you might have realized, does anything to do with actually managing and altering the scene. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a simple function. Okay. So we've created a new function, okay, and that function takes a parameter. Okay, so parameters is sort of a bit of information you pass to it. So you're basically going to pass to it the scene number. You're going to tell it the scene number. Okay, and when you load scene, what we're going to do is we're going to say scene manager dot load scene number. Okay, and that will simply unload the current scene and load the next scene. Okay, so what we could do, I mean, we could do it so that we could say, so say scene 0, scene 1, scene 2, okay, and just write out a load of them. But doing it this way is much faster. Okay, the function that takes the parameter scene number can be used over and over again, and all we have to do is each time we want to change its use, we just change the value we give it. So we go back to Unity, okay, and in Unity, okay, we now have, so I've attached my menu script to my canvas. If we go to our button, okay, we drag the object that the script is attached to, we go to menu script, okay, and we now have load screen. Okay, and you can see you have the little text box here where we can enter some information. Okay, so we say load scene 1. Okay, do it again, load scene 2, okay, and we could do it again and again and again. Okay. So now if we quickly check, okay, so when I click on the button 1, you can see the button change of colour, and I now move to scene 1. Okay. We'll just go back for the sake of anybody wants to argue. Okay, we'll just double check. You can now scene 2. Okay. So the same concept will work for anything. Will work for any game, any scene, any object. Okay. You can add these into your scene, so you can make stuff appear and disappear. You can do all sorts of things. But actually, one last thing I want to show you, just as a kind of a way to make things look a bit nicer. Menu looks very plain at the moment. You know, we can make it look a bit nicer, so we could put, for instance, a panel behind it. So panels are basically just images. Okay. So we can put a panel behind it, okay, to say this is what it could look like. Okay. And you'll notice that depending on where I put the panel, so if I put the panel like that, everything gets put behind it, whereas if I put it like that, where it's the first object, everything gets put in front of it, and that's because the first object gets drawn first, and then everything else gets drawn on top in the hierarchy. Okay? So I've got now an opaque panel. Okay? I could add some more images. Okay? So I could add some more images in. By obviously adding images and stuff like that, but we can also add animations. Okay, so what I'm going to do is make sure my button's selected. I'm going to go to Window, Animation. Okay, and this is where you actually record and you can create animations in Unity. Okay, really only work for simple animation, but actually buttons appearing, that sort of thing, things shrinking or growing, that worked perfectly. So what we're going to do, we're going to create a new animation clip, and we're going to call it Button Appear. Okay. So there's a couple ways we can do it. We can add a property, and we can sort of set it so that actually it keeps track of the position, and add our own keyframes. Or actually, even easier is we move it down so it's at the point where we wish it to start. Okay, and we hit record. Okay. And this now is recording all of our actions, and it will duplicate them in an animation. Okay, so we want the button start off screen. Okay, and at about 1 second in, okay, we want it to appear, okay, and take its place. Okay. If we click record again, we can now play it to preview. Okay, and in about a second, it drops in, and it's suddenly in place. So you can see that looks a little bit nicer, and you can do all sorts of things. You can have it flying in. Okay? The best part is you can actually add that animation and easily add it and duplicate it across different buttons, as long as they look and behave the same. So if we wanted to say add this to button 2, we can select button 2 in the hierarchy. Okay, so button 2 we haven't recorded any animation for. Okay, so what we're going to do, we're going to go to button 1, and we're going to copy. You can see that it's added this animator to it. So this is the bit that drives the animation, and we're going to click on the little 3 dots in the corner and copy component. Okay, and then we're going to go to button 2. We're going to click the little 3 dots and then paste component as new. So this copies one component to the other. So this is basically copying the animation setting from one to the other. Okay, and even though we haven't actually recorded a new animation, if I hit play, you can see that very nicely it all links in. Okay. And then if I press play, okay, they both move in together. Okay. At the moment we've got the animation set to loop, so we can make a couple of changes. Okay, so you can see that the animation here, so this is where the animation is saved. We'll just uncheck the loop time, and they can come in, and you can add more buttons. You could add option buttons. You could add all sorts of different bits and pieces. Okay, so that is a very, very simple explanation of how to create a menu in Unity. Very simple. Very easy to do, and hopefully it will be very useful for your games.